Well, it looks like the holiday numbers came in for 2013 for the retailers, and they're bad. How's that? Yeah, that was something I was kind of predicting. Actually, the worst growth they had for the holiday season. So you're probably going to see a lot of clearance sales out here now pretty soon. Since the worst growth they had since 2009. So, I kind of figured that. I mean, it wasn't that hard to figure out, right? Because I think they're throwing BS numbers at us. The government is. When you talk about the GDP, it includes a lot of things they used to not include. And actually, the GDP actually includes the growth of the banks, the major mega banks, right? So they got all this, all these more assets they have out there, and a lot of it's just pumped up from the Fed itself. It's not actually true productivity. But I want to actually say something about this stuff because, the truther movement, it's like two sides to it. And actually a lot of it is total defeatism. They're actually not presenting something good. They're only showing negative. And you know what? If we look back at the history of the United States of America, all the way, there's always been problems. That doesn't mean you throw it out and you got demand change. God, right now, I got like the antennas and the bullshit indicator, or whatever you want to call it. The communist indicator goes full tilt into the red anytime I see an organization with the word change in it, or a campaign slogan with the word change in it. So I want to get on with that. But silver is actually looking good today because the markets went down a little teeny smidgen, but it looks like all the metals are going up. Not just silver, but copper. And, I pointed out something really weird with copper before because it's like everybody's focused in on silver, gold, and the gold is like depleting out of the warehouses and stuff, and China's buying it up from the UK and all this kind of stuff, and there's almost no gold left. You're hearing all these stories, but, that's going on with everything pretty much, and copper. Isn't that weird? Copper prices are going like this, and the warehouse inventories are going down. Doesn't make sense. I guess the markets don't make sense a lot of times, but it may not make sense when it goes up too. It might go up higher than it should. That's something else I'm expecting. Now, there's a lot of problems I think sometimes in the so-called truther movement. I don't like it, to tell you the truth. I'm maybe part of it, but I'm not really presenting the same kind of garbage stuff they do. I don't want to call it garbage because I don't think I present garbage. But they're constantly pushing every single conspiracy out there and drama story. And I know that if I accidentally throw out a video, I don't want to say throw out a video, but I put out a video on something that's a little more dramatic, I noticed it takes off a hell of a lot more. And I guess it's really the problem is the average person is more attuned to drama than they are to real truth. Real truth is a little bit more boring maybe sometimes. I don't know, but who the hell knows? But just remember, we still have a constitutional republic in the United States. It's not like a freaking empire yet, A lot of people are talking like we're already transformed into an empire. No, we haven't. No, we haven't. We still have a limited form of government. I know it's getting bigger and bigger. But, these truthers are all about defeatism. It's like they're pushing everybody down in negative ways, and they're not telling anybody, what to do to fix the problem. I know a lot of people got behind Ron Paul and stuff like that, and I kind of very unpopular when I said that I thought Ron Paul was false opposition led from the top or something. And in retrospect, hindsight is 20/20. Yeah, it sure looks that way because he pushed everything. He got right behind Romney. He actually threw the debate to Romney. Actually, there was a lot of primary elections that he could have fought, and he didn't, and his supporters wanted him to fight. I'm thinking, if this guy doesn't even want to fight about when he gets cheated in primaries, how the hell is he going to fight against the the military-industrial complex and dismantling the Federal Reserve? It's all talk, right? I mean, come on. But, the solution actually is to get behind your representative in Congress. That's really what it is. And actually, some people in the United States actually are doing that. That's why we got some congressmen out there trying to defund, they were trying to defund Obamacare. And basically, You know, it probably worked. It probably worked. Now, I want to see something else, because I think the real reason you get silver is to basically opt out of the system, partly because, you know, the one place in the United States where things are kind of rigged, it's in the banking and financial sector. You know, you have to be very much connected in that sector, and it's actually a fraction of 1% that are in that sector that are the fraction of 1% of the highest wealth in the nation. They, you know, they own most of the wealth in the nation, and that's all about connections. And actually, these connections get passed down from, you know, through the family too, from the, you know, the father to the son and all this type of stuff. And actually, even how it goes in the United States. You know, I like YouTube because it's a way to actually strengthen America in a true sense, because we can exchange ideas for, you know, how to do things and how to be more productive and how to innovate and really get where the most impetus is for strength in the United States, through the middle class. You know, the middle class is actually the strength of the United States. It ain't the elite. The elite are not really innovators in any way, shape, or form. It's always been the middle class. So, in a lot of ways, this YouTube is a great thing because it's pretty much carte blanche. But I want to show you a chart. I mean, basically, you know, in the United States, if you really think there's a problem with wealth disparity, yes, it's true. But I don't want to get on the side of, you know, negativity too, because there's ways around it. You know, like part of that way around it is silver. But, you know, if you looked at the United States, we're sitting here on this graph, and actually this is a correlation chart between how wealth goes from the parents to the siblings, basically, and the position they have in the, you know, the caste system, basically, where the siblings of the parents are actually in the same wealth strata as the parents. Like in, you know, in other words, in America, it's touted to be that, you know, we all are born with the same opportunities. You know, a low-income person could be born in the ghetto and be president, right? And that's Obama's spiel, but that guy's a joke, man. But, you know, that's the whole theory behind it. The whole theory in America is like they tell you that, you know, anybody could rise to be the top strata in society. But actually, if you look at the reality, this is the United States. The correlation between wealth going from one generation to another generation within the family is pretty damn high. Now, somewhere where it's even worse, a lot worse, is in China, in Peru, in areas like that. This is China, and actually places where it's actually, there's less of a problem, where the wealth is basically in a caste system, where it goes from the parents to the siblings, and they stay in those positions in society. It's less so in Scandinavian states like Norway, Sweden, and Denmark. So in Australia, actually, too. Even Australia is down there. New Zealand, they're down here near the bottom, you know. But USA, it looks like there's pretty much a caste system, and that's partly from the banking system. A lot of it is the banking and finance system, which is the mega banks, which are all interconnected with the Federal Reserve. Ron Paul wasn't going to dismantle the Federal Reserve. Good news for you, man. That was BS. But the way we can actually get back at that is actually to opt out of the system more. And that means you can't totally opt out of the system. You can't go 100% silver, but you want to be partly out of the deal. Partly out of the deal. And actually, the only way to really make true wealth is to innovate and be productive. You know, these truthers are actually always talking about change all the time, and they're actually talking about, you know, it's almost like they want to destroy everything, but they're not telling you what to replace it with. You know, if we had that attitude, we would have had the United States destroyed many times over, because if you look back all the way from the late 1700s, from the time the United States was formed, all the way through the 1800s and the 1900s, the USA has always had problems. But it's not the system that is the problem itself. It's not the system itself. And actually, I want to give you a little example of, if you go back to ancient Rome, you know, like with Rome actually was more or less a constitutional republic since the beginning. It was 465 BC that Remus and Romulus, whatever it was, formed or founded Rome. It's a legend. I don't know if it's accurate or not. But it basically wasn't until Caesar crossed the Rubicon, I think it was in 4 BC, if I got that correct, I'm doing this all from memory, that it was considered an empire. Then he was murdered, and it was Caius Octavius Augustus who became emperor. And actually, he observed all the laws of the Senate. so it was like, even though it was an empire, it was pretty much like it was like a republic in a lot of ways anyway. And he lived a very, very long time. And then he was taken over by, I think it was Tiberius, who was actually an evil emperor, and then they murdered him, and it turned out to be Nero after that. The Praetorian Guard appointed Nero as the emperor or something. He was like hiding behind the drapes. And then we had, but all this time from like 4 BC all the way up to 69 AD, which was the fourth year of the four emperors. It was this Galba, Otho, Vitellius, and Vespasian. They had four emperors in succession, a lot of internal strife and civil wars. All during that time of 73 years, they were actually trying to restore the republic. They were seriously actually trying to restore the republic. They were always thinking about it. So, in the United States, we actually still have a republic. We actually still have a republic. See, any of these clowns out there like talking like Alex Jones that we're having an empire and the Nazis are freaking marching in front of D.C. like he always shows those images, that's not what's going on in the United States. We're not even close to that. It's a slow process. Yes, it's moving that way, but, they're having an attitude of defeatism, and also, actually, it's almost like he's calling, the people out of these truthers are calling for rebellion, but they're not actually offering any solutions. And, I got to say this. If you are some person that actually sees some problem going on within anything, even if it doesn't relate to you, and you see that something is unjust and unjustly treated or something is going on wrong, you should take action against that, even if it's small action, even if it's like, voicing your opinion on it or whatever, because all those actions add up. It's like, I think there's a lot of problems where things are getting out of hand. It's because a lot of people are not doing anything about it because it doesn't affect them. It doesn't affect them all. And actually, if you look back at Russia during the Bolshevik Revolution, it was, the ones that could have actually put a stop to the communists were actually the old guard, you might call it. It was actually the military from all the former times. They said the communists would not target them, but they would target them. They would target them. So, I actually even have to present this message to anybody who's even a former military. If you see any kind of injustice going on in the country anywhere, I mean, even you don't have to like revolt, but voice your opinion strongly and condemn those that are doing it, because there's a lot of stuff going on where you're looking at the nationalization of the police force and stuff like that. I know there's a lot of people that are sometimes in the military or the police, and they say, oh, well, hell, I'm just getting out and I'm going to go retire now, and the hell with this shit because I don't like this and this is bullshit. Well, do a little bit more than that. You know what I mean? Do a little bit more than that. Fighting back. But silver is actually part of the way you're fighting back the system in a lot of ways, because you're opting out of it. You're opting out of this bullshit caste system. Like the USA, we have such a correlation between parents and children going into the banking sector, because so-and-so was the son of so-and-so, and they get involved in, if somebody was the head of J.P. Morgan, his son is going to wind up being in one of those areas too. They're all interconnected. It's almost as bad as China. It's almost as bad as China, and that's actually where the strength lies of the upper elite, which are not productive innovators. They're parasites. The ones that are productive innovators are the middle class, the true middle class. So the middle class, in my opinion, should put a significant amount of their money in silver, especially right now. Later on, when the pumpers come out and they really freaking pump the metals, and they're saying it's going from, and it's way over what, the mines are making all kinds of money and all this kind of stuff, and they're going to be pumping silver left and right. That's where they're going to freaking screw over the middle class. I almost know it. But right now, it's not that way. Not that way at all. Not that way at all. And I just want to repeat again, those numbers that came in for Christmas, they're bad. They're the worst numbers they had since the growth for the retail sales, the worst they had since 2009. And if you recall, the actual middle of the financial crisis was not actually 2008. It was, if you want to pick a day, it was September 28th, 2009. September 28th, 2009. So, that's when they had almost a major crunch in the money markets and stuff like that. They actually had a major, almost they averted a major collapse. So actually it was that year, and actually it was 2010 when things started moving up and QE really came on very strong. Right? Correct? So we're about as bad as that right now, and I expect it probably to get worse because the middle class doesn't really have the funds or the discretionary income to spend a lot of money during Christmas, and it shows up. Now, these numbers that the government are putting out, like I said with the GDP, are including a lot of garbage that they never used to include before. And that includes the GDP of the mega banks. So what the hell are the mega banks doing? Nothing. Nothing. Gross domestic product of the mega banks, right? What product are they producing that people can actually utilize or eat or anything like that or use as energy? Nothing. 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 It's about as useful as, I don't know, what, Bitcoins? Anyway. Oh, by the way, I just want to add something about Bitcoins. I didn't really look into this deeply, but I wish I'd bought it and dumped it. But it looks like there's a game of the elite going on there too, because from when I researched about Bitcoins, I saw a couple things. They said over half the Bitcoins, or about half the Bitcoins, were owned by less than 1,000 people, but a third of all Bitcoins were owned by less than 50 people, which tells me something right there. Big time. Big time. Don't give up your metals for Bitcoins. Don't do something stupid like that. When Goldman Sachs buys up a lot of metals, and they're constantly buying up a lot of metals, they're not out to lose. They're not out to lose. It's a patient game. Don't go 100% into something, but don't give up your metals. And, if you want to keep accumulating, fine. Because even at this stage of the game, accumulating a little bit and stacking is not stupid. But if you're already stacked up a lot and you don't feel like accumulating more, you don't have to either. I mean, it's not like you have to do this. But just remember, at this stage of the game where the prices are now, they're low. I don't think they're going down to $8 to $10. Because, what I just saw with these Christmas numbers is exactly what I expected was going to happen. And a little worse. Actually, it was a little worse. So that means, how the hell is QE going to happen? Where they're talking? It's all bullshit. And Janet Yellen. Janet Yellen is actually going to put the gas on QE quite a bit. The end is coming up, man. The bond rates are spiking up to 3%. The end is coming up. But like I said, I want to emphasize that this is not some negative thing or defeatist thing. When it comes down to it, if the parasites on the top all go away, that's just not going to make all these silver holders filthy rich, and you're going to have to do nothing and sit on your ass. You're still going to have to be innovators and producers. It's unfortunate we got parasites on the top, but, once the parasites on the top are knocked out of the position, that doesn't mean you don't have to produce and innovate anymore. Some of these clowns that are freaking pushing the metals, they're like saying, oh, you're going to sit on a pile of cash and you're going to be wealthy all forever. That's not the game we're playing. The game we're playing is we want to be independent and allowed to produce and innovate and not be forced into the caste system. This is like China. The correlation of the caste system is very high. USA, it's pretty damn high. Actually, it's pretty low in Australia and New Zealand, and even lower in Scandinavian states. Quite interesting. So there is a problem in the USA, and I recognize it. But, it doesn't mean you can't work after, we defeat the elitist. It doesn't mean that. It doesn't mean that. So anyway, over and out, that's all my message on this. So anyway, just like we're not in an empire yet. I'll give you an example again of what happened with the Roman Empire. Even when it turned into an empire, it was like 70-something years later, they were still trying to restore the Republic. It didn't quite go away. So things aren't going to go to extremely bad really fast. And be highly aware, because my communist detector goes to full tilt red anytime people use the word change a lot, or they have the word change in their organization name. I don't trust them.